Hey everyone, welcome to another AI conversation, and I'm joined today by Nikki, who I met when I talked to the Super Focus team. So welcome, Nikki, to AI Conversations.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah, actually, I was really looking forward to having this chat because you have a really good topic. So, but before we get into it, maybe for the maybe one or two people who don't know you, can you give us a brief background on what you do, and maybe then segue into the topic that we can talk about?
Yeah, so I think you and I are on very niche sides of the internet. So for my niche side, I think most people would know me as Miss Universe Philippines to Gig 2023. But more than that, on a deeper level, by profession, I am a lawyer as well as a teacher. And then since coming back here in the Philippines for the past few years, I've been able to really hone my community work and my charity work. So a lot of people will also know me as a really active ambassador of charities like Save the Children PH, Autism Philippines, Hope for Lupus Philippines, which advocates for the autoimmune disease of lupus. And one that's really near and dear to my heart is Mind Nation, which is a health organization. And then recently, oddly enough, thanks to my boyfriend Eric, who was on your previous podcast with his business partner Steve Shu, and shout out to Tashar Sheth, I found myself unexpectedly but really enjoyably within the sector of AI startups and sort of how that is in effect with IBPAP and BPOs. And so it's been really interesting for me to use my learnings from charity work, from, being in impoverished communities and also working on mental health within companies and how all of that is playing into effect, within the BPO industry, within um, our workforce, our education system, and how all of that is affecting the Philippine economy. So it's been really enjoyable, and yeah, it's been mind blowing, sometimes saddening, to be quite honest, just to know that as a country, we have not promoted our education systems well enough to really enhance the capabilities that I know as Filipinos we have, which of course leads to poor mental health. It leads to poor trajectory. But I'm hoping that, with the implementation of I know most people are scared of it, but for me, I think it's really exciting because it offers, from my experience, the ability to alleviate a lot of strain, whether that be strain in a lack of education or strain on your mental health. So, yeah.
All right, there's a lot we can talk about, but hopefully this isn't left field. We might as well start with the obvious. Um, be, Starting as a beauty queen,
Yeah.
basically. Most people probably don't know what goes on in the mind of people who join these pageants. So can we start there? Like how did you start from there and then segue into kind of your charity work, and then let's touch into AI after. But coming from an experience like that, what goes on in your mind, going through that experience?
Yeah, I think there are many different reasons why a beauty queen would join a pageant. I know for some of them it's a way to get a leg up in life. I know for others it's a way to just, enhance the people that they already are, whether they're, pre-existing artists or celebs. I think for me, my personal reason came down to 2 points. One, it's ego based. It's to prove yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, Having a background in law, you're constantly being told, you can't be, at least because I also grew up in Europe prior to moving back here to the Philippines. And so I think in Europe, we are less um idolizing of someone who's pretty and smart. In Europe, it's something that you still quite get bashed for. It's like, oh, there's
Wow.
no way you can show up to an office, dressed in a pink suit. Like you have to fit this form of what it means to be a high-powered woman. And if you want to be pretty, then okay, go do modeling, go do something else. Whereas pageantry is this really great platform that promotes you to be the best version of yourself, meaning the only way you can win, quite honestly, is if you are as impressive as possible. You have to be educated. Even if you didn't go to school, you have to be educated in life. And you have to not only be beautiful, but you have to have had achievements. You have had to have given back to your community. So in one way it was just a competition within myself to prove that, yeah, like I'm the best I can be at who I am right now. But
Mhm.
then on a bigger note, I've always had a heart for charity. By background, my parents have always worked in communities with those that have autism or Down syndrome. So it's always been something in my heart that, I want to give back. But at the same time, if you are just one individual, your ability to really make a change, as intentional as you might be, is small. And I always believe that when you interact with people, you are changing their lives in even the smallest way, just by being kind or being compassionate. But I wanted to do more than that. I wanted to actually be able to give something of value that could put a child through school, or for example, I've worked within the deaf community, so give them the ability to communicate, and that comes with having a platform. And so when you join a pageant, you get popularity, you get a fan base, and you also get the ability to be an ambassador to organizations that honestly otherwise might not have had a place for you beyond volunteering. And so for me, those were my two reasons, and thankfully I've been able to reap the rewards of that. I feel good about myself and I'm helping, so thank you.
No, that's great. Actually, this was an unexpected strand. We'll try to tie it back to AI soon enough. But what I wanted to highlight is, and this is my view. Let me know if you agree. Um, Pageants are about stories. You
Yeah.
know, it's the story of the candidates, and then there's also the quintessential Miss Universe question, obviously, and some candidates get bashed
Mm.
for answering wrong. I mean, you're in the heat of the moment, right? The pressure is on. But if you're able to give a very good answer, it goes very, very far. And then you're correct. It is a platform for change. In the same way, celebrities, some of them lend their fame to pioneer or to champion a cause. It's an interesting way of how society works, no? Parang lalo na in the Philippines. I agree that um the attitude towards pageants between here and abroad is also different. But we're also kind of avatar based. We want to rally around a hero or a villain. So anyway, what I wanted to ask you was about some very, very big segue is how do you see that playing out in the causes that you're promoting, your charity work and mental health, because I'm so sure you encounter a lot of stories yourself. I mean, do you have a process there, and how you process, how do you consolidate all of that and then give back and use some sort of a message to attract more attention for this particular issue?
Yeah, so for example, I'll sort of go through each of my charities and my experiences. So, on a personal note, for the two charities I work with, one Autism Philippines. As mentioned, my parents have a background in working with those that have autism or those that are on the spectrum or have Down syndrome. And that is something that isn't so well educated here in the Philippines. And so it's really just me taking the education I got from Europe and how to be a good community leader towards those that have differences, and just using my platform. It really is mostly through social media. As an individual, who doesn't have licensures in medicine or psychology of any kind, the only thing I can really do is just spread awareness. And so that's what I do with Autism Philippines. It's what I do also with Hope for Lupus. By background, I was once diagnosed with lupus, and so that was an
Wow. Yeah.
yeah. I'm okay now, thank you, Lord. But it's through that experience that I was able to also, I think, build my compassion, because I also believe that no one goes through the same things, but
Yeah.
feelings are transferable. So, for example, somebody might have lost their house, somebody might have lost their loved one, but both of those are feelings of hopelessness. And I think if you've gone through something like that, even being in a privileged position that I am, having access to healthcare, being better now, I'm able to better relate to the people that I am helping, because I genuinely know how they feel. And then for my nation, which is the org that I do the most active work with, mental health, it's really just taking like my own personal downfalls and like mental breakdowns and also the mental fortitude it takes, to be in high pressure environments like law or pageantry and giving workshops on how to, for example, mind your own mental health when you're giving back, or how to love yourself when you think you're not enough. Or for example, I've done I think we've spoken about this before. I've done talks within BPOs on, how to manage your work life and how to manage your mental health when everything is so stressful. So really, at least in the capacity that I can, what I do is similar to you, where it's just spreading information, because there are only a few people in this world who can really take actionable steps to, for example, buy a school or give free healthcare. But at least for you and I, it's the ability to share and spread information and then hoping that gets to the right people.
Yeah, that's really there's a lot we can dig into that. Maybe okay. Here's I don't know if this is easy, but a straightforward question. What kinds of misconceptions do you encounter about mental health? Because we're not the country that kind of looks favorably on, let's say, therapy, for example. It's not common, and there's a lot of caricatures, in the Philippines about people with mental health conditions. Like we have the word baliw that's used as a joke, no?
Mm.
But it actually belies a lot of deeper levels. So, any thoughts on that? Like, what are these kind of myths or caricatures we have on mental health that are worth revisiting?
Yeah, I think I have my top three actually, which I commonly talk about in the workshops I give. One is that you're just maarte.
Right.
It's just the fact that, you're overacting, it's too much, just calm down, which is unfortunate because, it's really important for people's feelings to be validated. And, just because no one else around you feels that way doesn't mean how you're feeling isn't true to you. So I think it's really a shame because maarte is also used in, as you said, a joking context where it's, you're not even feeling as if your emotions are taken seriously, you're just dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
I think another one, which is a little bit controversial for me to say, but it's true. We are a Catholic country, primarily percentage wise. And so I think a lot of the time, when an individual finally does have the strength to say they have issues or to say they need help, rather than being given to a professional or to an understanding ear, it's you should pray.
Mm. Yeah.
Which, prayer is, as a Catholic myself, it's a really wonderful way to find peace within yourself. But mental health is a disease. It's, there's medical components to it. And
Yep.
so to have that disregarded, to not get the help you need in the belief that you just need to have more faith or sometimes even more fear, that's really a
Mm.
um, and I think the last one is we are a very happy nation. We are a nation that, really likes to pave,
Celebrate.
yes, pave way through hardships. But I think sometimes in a way that's detrimental because you'll often find that, when somebody does complain or share an anxiety, it's, oh, you should just be grateful, or why can't you just be happy? And so I think it's embedded within our culture, within our attitude as a nation to be dismissive because we've made that for ourselves. We want to be happy, faithful, strong people. But I think we've forgotten that there's also strength to be found in vulnerability and that the best way to be strong is to actually heal through that first.
Yeah, no, that's very true, especially the religious part.
Mm,
Um, and it's not just limited to mental health. There are so many conditions that
yeah.
people are not inclined to seek medical attention.
Yeah.
Or ano yun? God works in mysterious ways. Yeah, it's a very cliche but deadly, if you ask me, deadly assumption.
And it's a
Um,
shame 'cause as someone who is personally quite spiritual, whilst I don't share that often because I like to
mm,
keep everybody, within their own individual belief systems. But for me, I always look at it that, everybody on earth has their own little job. So doctors are there for a reason. therapists, they're there for a reason.
Yeah.
Let's let them bless us in their own way also.
Yeah. Let God work through them, basically. Yeah, it's a good life hack. All right. Talk about projects, in the mental health space or any initiatives that people should be aware of. Or I don't know. I'm sure you also conduct trainings and sessions, and let us know what's going on in that world.
Yeah, so I think I mentioned a few times previously, but I do a lot of workshops. I primarily it's between two women and BPOs. When I do workshops for women, it's empowerment, it's how to love yourself, it's how to heal through pain. And then the two primary workshops I give for BPOs, mostly because BPOs are just one of our biggest industries and our most prominent industries. So whilst I'm normally supposed to just, give talks to any general company, those companies do happen to be BPOs. And so I've sort of found patterns within that. But the two most common workshops or sort of mental health trainings I give are how to give back, like when you're already giving so much, because, for example, it's important to nourish yourself, to nourish your soul, but how are you doing that when you're working in a stressful environment like a BPO? Like, how do you have any other time in the world to do anything, let alone for yourself or someone else when you are so stressed and overwhelmed? And then, as mentioned before, just how to navigate that work-life balance and how to have the gumption and the integrity to keep going, especially when life is hard, and to find that balance. Because also, as a Gen Z, I know that there is a stigma against us. Hopefully, I'm not one of them,
Is
where
there?
yes, where we don't necessarily have the tolerance for hard work in the same way that boomers and millennials have. I think we have like the highest rate of like job turnover and quitting compared
Ghosting, the Gen Z ghosting. Yeah, correct.
compared to any other generation. And so what I'm trying to teach is like, okay, honor your truth. If it's too much, it's too much. But like, how do you train yourself to push past stress so that you can build through it rather than crashing and breaking down? Because I think people also confuse mental health as being sad.
Mm.
Mental health is also just coping through life. It's how do I go about my workday positive and with a steady mindset that if things start collapsing, I'm still okay and I can get through it, versus starting your workday, hating your life, hating your tasks, and
Mm.
ending the day absolutely fatigued and overwhelmed.
Yeah, I have so many branches to go through. Maybe here's a low hanging one, but I want to ask you about BPOs as well. But there's a term that's become popular called toxic positivity. Is that really a thing, or is that more of a meme?
No,
Especially on social media.
yeah, I 100% believe it's real. It's something that I went through myself also, but I think it's something most people go through in their like therapy journey, because you kind of have to go black to white before you find your gray. But I think for me, the healthiest form of mental health is acknowledgement and acceptance.
Mm.
So for example, a healthy person can acknowledge that they are in a difficult situation, that they are stressed, that they are overwhelmed, that what is happening is unfair,
Mm.
but to acknowledge that, okay, you might have limited choices. So you're going to do it in a way that is acknowledging that hardship, but still acknowledging your limited choices and saying, okay, with what I have around me, this is what I'm going to do in the healthiest way possible, knowing my limitations. Toxic positivity is like, oh, my job was mean to me today and I deserve to be at peace, so I'm going to quit.
Wow. Quiet quitting. which
Toxic
which
positivity,
which
yeah,
leads to that, right? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Or it's saying that, if someone did something awful to you, it's just disregarding that, being like, oh, tomorrow will be okay, rather than having an honest conversation, sharing your feelings, trying to mediate that. So it's very real. And I think it's important to strike that balance of just honesty, acceptance, acknowledgement.
Yeah. Actually, that just opened up another can of worms for me because I'm a big student of technology and how it affects society and social media in particular, not even talking about the AI part. In a way, it's kind of like a window to people's projected, self or projected consciousness. So a lot of people treat, let's say, Twitter or Facebook like a chat room. They just say whatever they think they want, or some people project a certain image. The toxic positivity seems to be in that domain. But then you add into the mix the politics of it, the disinformation of it, and for me, that can put a lot of people at risk because as much as social media is a product of that kind of that consciousness that they want to project, they're also consuming all of that crap basically from other people. Where if you had removed social media and had a decent conversation with someone, it would be very measured. In a way, it would be very filtered, and there's guardrails in place. But on social media, those guardrails seem to be out. People are just throwing stuff, and that's where trolling comes in. So my question to you would be, in the context of mental health, let's hear it from someone who's practicing mental health advocacy. What should be the proper approach to social media for the average individual? Is social media toxic for your mental health?
It can be toxic if you allow it to be. I think by nature it is toxic because it removes all social etiquette. As you
Mm.
said, people can be trolls, they can be mean, they can hide behind profiles. So I think by nature the toxicity is inherent because people don't have to be themselves. They can be either the best or the worst, but there's so little truth in social media. It's one big lie, except maybe Twitter when people are sharing like factual information, but everything else is articulated and orchestrated. So for me, it's really hard. It comes down to just self-discipline. And it's following only the people that don't trigger you or hurt you,
Mm. Mm.
but at the same time, like, being accountable. Like, don't be so delusional that you're not going to follow a news channel just because it has bad news. Like, you need to be aware of what's happening in the world. But at the same time, like, for example, as a girl, don't follow a model who makes you feel bad about your body.
Wow.
But,
Yeah.
but if you want to improve your body, maybe follow a fitness channel. So
Mm.
that, okay, you are following something that's going to help you improve, but you're not following the thing that's going to mentally break you down and berate yourself. So it's comes down to like an honest conversation with yourself that, okay, if I follow these pages, then I'm going to be susceptible to thinking this way or acting this way. Is that good for me? If not, then I'll take a break. Oftentimes I'll also use it as like a checkpoint for healing. So if there's like some pages that make me feel insecure or angry, I'll mute them. And then in a couple months, I'll follow them again and see how they make me feel. And I'll be like, oh, okay, I feel okay now. Like I don't feel triggered in any way. And then it's a nice way to also check in on yourself. But yeah, it comes down to discipline and also awareness. Like you have to make sure that you're following people whose opinions are as objective as possible. Don't follow like a weird meme page for your news. Like please,
Propaganda.
yeah, like don't get stuck in propaganda. Like please, follow Sky News, BBC, Reuters, CNN, like anything that is a little bit more legit than a meme page and learn from that.
It's important because I'm actually part of this phenomena where some people are afraid to lose out on information
Yes.
that they almost indiscriminately follow a lot of people,
Mhm.
and forget that actually social media is something you can curate for yourself. So you block people you don't like, or you unfollow them, or you mute them. That is a functionality offered to you by
Yeah.
the platforms for a reason.
Yeah.
But then some people kind of want to get drenched in so much information, so they don't want to miss out, and they let the crap in as much. Yeah. Share with you something that I did that I'm partially regretting actually back in 2022, right after the elections. So obviously, it's a very polarized environment. It's less so now, but it was very polarized right after the election.
Yes, I
And
moved here during the elections and I was like, oh no, should I move back?
yeah, so it was so toxic online. And I started attending these Twitter spaces, it's what put Clubhouse out of business actually. Which is a mix of it's like a hybrid between chat groups and radio because you get to listen to people conversing and then you can grab the mic if you wanted to. So there were equal numbers of spaces that were political on one side and the other. So you have the DDS and the Loyalista, and you have the Kakamping, the Dilawan. And I attended all of them. And my intention was sort of as an experiment because one issue that we rarely talk about nowadays, but it was a big deal back then, is this concept of echo chambers,
Mm,
where you basically follow people you like, so you only get fed information that technically you like. And that's bad for kind of getting an unbiased view. In theory, it's bad. So I thought, why don't I equalize my echo chamber by attending these two spaces? So I started to get also followers from both sides. I think I think I still have a fairly balanced following as a result. But then I also got equal amounts of toxicity on both sides. So instead of, in a way, unbiasing or debiasing my feed, I got quadruple the toxic stuff. And it was hard, to just see all of that crap. And fortunately, as a data person, I know, okay, this is just data. And somewhere here's the real signal underneath the noise. But it was tough. I had to take time out of social media deliberately for days, sometimes a week, or I'll go into another platform. Interestingly enough, um, I have I spend about equal amounts of time on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter, and they're very different from each other. They have their own special type of toxicity.
yeah.
Uh, and lately, I've been looking at Instagram as well. Oh my God, that's a different type of toxicity as well.
Really.
Instagram is the ideal world. Everyone's happy, everyone's rich, everyone's pretty. Very, it's fantasy,
All a lie. Trust
Yeah,
me. Been behind those pictures. I promise you that only 1% of them is real.
it's a setup, diba? And then you get bombarded with that. Sa LinkedIn naman, everyone's getting promoted, everyone has a job, everyone's so smart, everyone's an expert. And then on Facebook actually these days is on balance probably the more neutral. You do have the trolling, but you can block people. But I think um there's a lot of social circles on Facebook because you have groups, you have pages. There's a lot of disinformation as well. And then Twitter, I would say the most political. You know, not my AI tweets rarely trend, but then if I tweet about traffic or corruption or whatnot, oh my God, just goes through the roof. So he said, okay, it's like ano it's like classic TV. You have channel 2, channel 7, and you choose what kind of shows you want. So whereas in TV, everything got more homogeneous, everyone started pumping the same type of content. In social media, it's actually quite varied. But the toxicity is there. It's just coming through in different forms. No. Anyway, I just wanted to share that.
No, it's true, and that's why I really think it's about because you've like gotten to that point where you're aware of that, right? You're aware there are instances that are toxic for you. So it's also accountability of like, okay, um, sometimes you are gonna get biased information, but the information you get on social media can just be a starting point. And then to hold yourself accountable that even though we are in the age of tech, there are books and articles that we can use to fact check. We don't have
Mhm.
to trust people. We can use them as a way to spark ideas in our mind, to open ourselves up to new ideas, but it's really up to us to also form our own opinions. Because I think sometimes I've been susceptible to it also, where I'll read an opinion and I'm like, oh yeah, that's my opinion now, when I've done no work to get to that point where I actually believe what they're saying, but it just makes sense in my head. And so I'm holding myself accountable to like, okay, wait, let me actually read about this and have like an inherent value into the work that I'm doing before I say I can assign myself to an opinion or other.
Yeah. Yeah, just one more question on social media because I want to talk about other things as well. Do you recommend going off the grid for extended periods? Is that something that's advisable, depending on the circumstances?
Um, I think if you, because I'm like a proponent, like do what feels good for you. So
Yeah.
I think if you feel the need to, yes. But personally, what I feel is that I like to like manage myself through hardship. So for me, I
Yeah.
would rather just force myself to learn how to live with it healthily
Hmm.
than to go off grid because it also is the case where unfortunately while I really admire the people that are capable of not being online, it is the case where the way our world is advancing, unless you are in those platforms, it's really hard to get the information that you need as fast as you need. um and as you said, like even as someone who isn't necessarily within the tech and AI industries, I get scared about not having enough information because something new comes every day. And so I think if you really feel the need to, like, go ahead because it's also important to not crash.
Yeah.
But I would try find a way to make it a good space for you because you're gonna need it. Like, please don't fall behind. It's so scary, but it's the truth. It's important to be aware. So even if that means just following news pages or your mom, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Just, if you can experience things um, in a different way to other people that is healthy for you. You don't have to completely cut yourself off because then you cut yourself off from the world and that's scary.
Yeah, and like the newer platforms like TikTok,
Mhm.
I personally struggle with it. I'm on it, but the activity on it is just hyper realistic for me. Like,
Well,
you know,
it's not it isn't orchestrated in a way that you can trust it. Like
yeah,
you
yeah, yeah,
at least with well, somewhat controversial since now you can buy them, but at least formerly with Twitter, you had your verified ticks. You could say, okay, this guy is a great thinker. This guy is a real history professor. I can trust what they say. TikTok isn't that. TikTok is random people giving random opinions, and it's a large form of unregulated news. And so
it is,
for
and
me, it's
yeah.
an entertainment platform only. I wouldn't trust it for much else
Yeah,
yet.
although I don't know if you've seen the news, the Indonesian elections. I think
Mm.
the front runner who's going to win practically got elected using TikTok and an AI generated cartoons of himself. So talk about, so it's the tables have completely changed.
Yeah.
Social is the real world. The real world is just a caricature based on
Well,
what people saw on social.
yeah, it's a popularity contest. It really is about how many followers you have and how many people you can have click a like button. And it also just boils down to money because the more popularity you have, the more money in terms of power you have, and then it's just this big catch 22.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Let's go back to mental health. And you said you work with BPOs. Talking about BPOs in particular, are there have you noticed any mental health and related risks that are unique to the BPO sector or strongly associated with BPO workers?
I wouldn't say unique, but definitely strongly associated is just that feeling of overwhelmingness and
Hmm.
stress. And also, excuse me to say, but it's true, it's a lack of independent thought.
Hmm.
Because just as an example, an average BPO worker will be, a graduate of a university. And then they will be going into an industry that, say, each BPO has like 10,000 manuals of information. Each manual has like 120 pages. And And it's those manuals that are the information that this call center worker will then inform a client or a user on the phone. And they're not taught the fundamental knowledge of things. They're just taught to regurgitate the manuals.
Hmm.
And as a human, how can you regurgitate hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pages with confidence
Hmm.
if you haven't been taught the fundamental values of the company you're working for? And also, just the ability to consume that much information after like a 2 month onboarding period. It's not enough time.
Hmm.
And have these individuals who unfortunately are being yelled at or abused verbally on the phone by customers who are irritated by a lack of information. But the only thing they can do is regurgitate the manuals because there's no process of being empowered on how to think for themselves. It's what's in the manual is the truth. And
Yeah.
so oftentimes, I'm sure you've experienced it, especially here in the Philippines, you'll be on hold for 20-30 minutes
Yeah.
because because they're trying to find an answer rather than having the confidence, the training, and the awareness and education to come up with an answer themselves that is outside the realm of those books. And just to sort of sector into it a little bit, it's why I'm really excited for AI, because
Hmm.
when you have a machine that's capable of going through all of those manuals to give the rudimentary answers, then I think it's so much better for the people that are working in the BPOs because one, they're less stressed, and two, you can enhance them as individuals.
Hmm.
Like rather than wasting their potential and their capability by just regurgitating lines from a book, you can teach them independent thought, you can teach them managerial skills, and you can teach them computer skills and how to actually have confidence in their own abilities, which I think as a whole will make the Filipino BPO industry a lot more powerful and a lot more autonomous in the way that it works within itself.
Hmm. Hmm. I think there's some layers to that. The way BPO work is structured was meant to be repeatable, so it can be packaged, diba? And offshored. So in a way, it intersects with the fears of AI because if it's that repeatable, then at some level, at beyond a certain threshold, a machine can probably do it. And then machines are also pushing the boundary towards
Yeah.
it doesn't need to be repeatable. A machine can still do it. Like a large language model doesn't need to use a specific script. You can just give it guidelines and it will answer along those guidelines, but it can use different words and phrases the way a human would. So that overlap is getting closer and closer. From a mental health standpoint, how does that affect some people, you know? Because I can see it's kind of a pressure. You pointed out it's a pressure on two fronts. Eh? On the one hand, because it's so repetitive, that's bound to affect your mental state at some level. And then on the other hand, you have the prospect of losing your job or losing your purpose. Because a lot of people get validation because of their job. You know, you are your job, and then now there's a prospect of your job doesn't need to be you. Your job can be a robot or an algorithm or a machine. How do you see that playing out in your experiences with BPOs or potentially playing out?
No, 100%. That is the largest fear. It's becoming obsolete in your industry. And that is such a valid fear, and it's true, and it's something that I think from a like background in charity and community work, it's something that really breaks my heart because I know that the people that are going to be most affected by that shift momentarily are the ones that are in the most difficult situations or have had the most difficult backgrounds. And it is a reality. It is a reality that as AI integrates itself within BPOs or other industries, that there is going to have to be a certain cutoff percentage of people. Um, but I think that's inevitable, or unfortunately, like, please don't get me wrong, it breaks my heart, but it is an inevitable truth. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, it's a truth that we really have to face head on because, like, if I were a BPO worker, I would be frightened. Um, and I think the only hope that I would hold on to is just the ability to hopefully like be empowered within my company to upskill.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, yeah, AI is getting more powerful. There is going to come a point in the future where it's probably going to be better than all of us, you and myself included. Like, there's already AI virtual girls in the world. So I'm sure there's going to be an AI pageant in the future. You
Yeah,
know,
not too
yeah,
long from now.
likely, but I think we're sort of in this interval period where we have the ability to catch up to the extent where we can position ourselves well enough that people are still needed, but just at a higher skill level to work with those AI systems. And so
Yeah.
that's why, you know, what my boyfriend Eric is doing and Steve Shu and Tishar with Super Focus and IBPAP, that to me is really exciting because we're giving Philippines a chance.
Hmm. Hmm. One thing that,
Mhm.
having worked in the BPO myself, one thing that I found distinct, because I spent a decade and a half in banking, 11 years of it in a non BPO context. Like I hate the term, but maybe a proper bank
Yeah,
context.
I know what you
And
mean.
then another 3 to 4 years in a BPO bank, which is actually proper banking work, but it was in a BPO. So, but what I found really distinct about the BPO side of that career was, apart from it lends itself to standardization and automation, there's a very high emphasis on performance and
Mm,
metrics. Kasi nga, because it's offshore, no? They want to justify their value. Otherwise, why did you take money, work from Americans, Australians, the Brits? Because these are foreign banks, sending work across to the Philippines.
mm,
Now, when we talk about performance, this is just me thinking out loud. That has impact on people's confidence and mental health as well. So, I guess the question I want to ask is, how do you strike that balance? Because if you're too performance oriented, in my
mm,
view, that can come at the expense of mental health.
mm,
That can come at the expense of, humanity. People are just reduced to numbers and quotas and milestones. It becomes dehumanizing. It becomes soul crushing. On the flip side, mental health. If we want to take care of mental health, sometimes that may come at the expense of business performance,
yeah.
at the expense of profitability. Or am I making a false dichotomy there? No? What do you think of that?
It's 100% true. Um, and I think that's why I get brought in a lot of the times to companies, namely BPOs. It's because the solution to that is the leadership team. And that's why I'm really grateful that when a BPO, for example, Concentrix, they brought me in, and I was really grateful for them because I thought like, okay, this is amazing that the leadership within this BPO recognizes the importance of mental health. And so in that way, the employees, the workers are also being empowered to, in an appropriate way, balance that performance with that health. Or if they can't, at least they've been given a small platform or a small glimpse of how to look after themselves when performance is key. I think there really is no way to balance those two if the leadership teams within a company don't prioritize that. Because then, unfortunately, especially here in the Philippines, where I think a lot of the time we do consider people disposable, which is unfortunate. Um, I know that people from I've spoken with that I've done workshops with that they do feel replaceable. And so performance takes hold over mental health. And the only way that a balance can be struck is again through that leadership system. It's being empowered by the people that you work for, which isn't always the case. That's so sad to say, but that is the solution. Not everyone is implementing the answer.
Yeah, and I wonder what goes on through the minds of the leaders when confronted with this issue, because I can imagine it might translate to, for example, higher attrition rates. People are quitting their jobs. or lower productivity, or
I
you
think
know,
it,
yeah.
yeah, I think here in the Philippines, it's really lower productivity. Um, Simply because, like, again, an example of a BPO, if you have, multiple employees in your company who don't have the mental bandwidth to cope with the hundreds of people that are yelling at them each day. That, of course, is going to bring down your productivity and your performance in terms of how the people you're working with perceive you. And then in terms of like offshore perception, that's going to be very negative also. And so I think for me, if I was a leader from the work that I've done, it would just make more sense to equip your team members mentally because it leads to efficiency and it leads to effective work rather than having tears and stress and breakdowns. If you have mentally capable people because you've supported them, it's just more efficient work. Same thing with AI. Like I would really love to start going in on and giving talks on how to calm your nervous system regarding, what people think is an impending doom, but really it's just a necessary change that we can work around.
Yeah, let's talk about AI a little bit. Um, how do you suggest people approach the question of generative AI? Because, for example, one thing I've tried as much as possible to do is make it friendlier to
Yeah.
everyone, less technical, although it can certainly get technical at times. And then the implications, a lot of people love talking about the implications, sometimes to the to the extent of overhyping the downsides, like job losses, cheating in school, deep fakes, all these really nasty things. So if you were going to give advice to kind of the typical, I don't know, typical employee, typical BPO agent, or anyone, what are some guidelines you can give them about how to approach AI?
Yeah, I think for me, it's acceptance and progression as soon as possible. I think a lot of the tension that is happening right now is because of a fear of progression. But fortunately or unfortunately, AI, the way it's going to implement itself in our world, it's inevitable. Uh, and it would really just be so beneficial for your mental health, for your place in the world in the future, for the work that you're going to do to find a way to intertwine yourself with it. So, for example, for schools, having a background in teaching myself, um, I think it's laughable that teachers are upset that children are writing their essays on ChatGPT because for me, it's the world we're in now. So rather than scoring an essay based on the words that are written, use different metrics, use different parts of a child's brain that you can then grade rather than just the words on paper. And that's something that we're just going to have to keep relearning and re-navigating and giving new standard guidelines for. So and I think it's also again going back to in education, it's so wasteful to not use that, especially here in the Philippines, where unfortunately we're already behind in terms of the education that we're providing our children. That to also remove the potential to learn with AI, we are going to limit, if not remove, their potential in the future by not allowing them that opportunity. And so for me, I think before in the past, this is so archaic, but when girls went to school, we would only learn how to bake and how to sew. But, through the advancements of society, we learned that, okay, the world is becoming more equal now. Let's also teach girls how to do math and English and science and history. In the same way, we have now been equal, but AI is coming in. Robotics are enhancing. So let's teach kids how to use that. Why do they need to know how to do maths manually with pen and paper when they could probably be doing calculus at age 7 with an AI computer? Like, why not teach them the capacity to excel in the same rate that the world is? Because if we are holding ourselves back, then I think as a culture, as an economy, we're not going to offer ourselves the chance to positively adapt into the future. So if I was a normal person, I would just say don't be scared. Like do your research. As a BPO worker, like even if it's not being implemented into where you work now, like play around with ChatGPT. See how that would enhance the work that you're doing at home. Watch shows, read articles, listen to podcasts. Just be aware so that should the time come where you meet it face to face, you're knowledgeable enough to onboard it rather than run away from it. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I was too lost in thought after what you discussed, because I do deal with a number of educators and
Mm.
institutions, and the resistance is high.
Yes.
Although, as the Borg would say, it's actually futile. Resistance is futile, but it is quite high. One of the most extreme views I've seen, and I'm sure there's basis for it, is AI actually makes students dumber. It stupefies. And part of my gut reaction to that is you're blaming AI for what is otherwise a flaw in your curriculum.
Correct.
And all AI will do is accelerate that flaw. So,
Yeah.
students have been cheating long before AI came about. AI just makes it more efficient. So you're blaming AI for something that's already in endemic or systemic. And I'm going to be a bit unfair with this, but it's it. I find it's always with almost no exception, usually hard to convince academia of their own faults. They're happy to admit it themselves, but when it comes from outside academia, it's very hard because you pretty much spent your entire career validating yourself,
Yeah.
by taking your degrees, your PhDs, your masters, your accolades, getting your papers published. So it's all this. Actually, this is a mental health question in a way. All this self affirmation getting into your head, and suddenly somebody pokes, through that and says, "What you're doing is actually flawed." How
Yeah.
how am I flawed? So I get that. Occasionally I get a glimmer of hope when they
Mm.
say, but then we need to be more progressive. I know, there's a priest I interviewed some time back, Father Ben Beltran, and he's dealing with kind of the dropouts of the school system. He's out of school youth, people who quit, learning because not just because of economics, but these kids pretty much just lost faith in the system. Classrooms bore them to no end. And yet on the flip side, they're happy to spend, hours on Mobile Legends and Valorant and Minecraft. So Father Ben had this interesting insight. There's something happening in that side of the fence that the classrooms are not capturing.
Yeah.
So what if we could merge it? So he's it's still a work in progress, but he has a theory of learning that, brings together, non-traditional teaching techniques and AI and blockchain, all these technologies. He uses VR goggles. And I think one of the biggest glitches I call it a glitch that he found was he was able to get via the ALS, the Alternative Learning System program of DepEd, to recognize these certifications by IBM
Oh,
as equivalent to a high school diploma. So he gave these out of
yeah.
school youth, he was able to source some tablets for them, gave them all tablets. But then he said, you can only keep the tablets if you finish these certifications. And without going through a formal schooling or classes, the kids did it. They're accumulating all these badges, and via ALS, that's equivalent. There's a certain equivalency to high school, diploma. But then at the same time, they've taken certifications in cybersecurity, analytics, blockchain. So I found that I said, wow, that's an interesting glitch. That might be, it might not be the solution, the complete solution yet, but certainly a step in the right direction, because you have these otherwise, neglected members of the education system actually completing, requirements and training. So I think the last leg there is, are they actually employable? Are they at a level where they can at least score an entry level job in a BPO? If we can do that, then it's now full circle. We've short circuited education pretty much.
But that is the potential because I think right now our education system, as you said, is so flawed because it's teaching basic knowledge that isn't adaptable
Mm-hmm.
to our present world. Like as important as language and learning about your history is, I think what's more important is how applicable your skill set is to the future workforce. And so we should really be teaching kids coding and cybersecurity and how to navigate an AI system, especially here in the Philippines, where the way our economy is, not every child can afford to go to university. To have the basic skill set of even video editing
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
yield them a far more prosperous future than if they went through education for 12 years learning about Philippine history.
Mm. And just like that, the hour is almost up, by the way. But
Um,
um, we can still continue talking, so no pressure. But there's just so much to unpack. So maybe I'll go back to where we started. So you did mention you were a lawyer.
yeah.
You are a lawyer.
Mhm.
Uh, how do you see the legal profession figuring into all this? Because of course, I have a very biased experience, but I haven't had a progressive discussion with a lawyer about Gen AI yet.
Ooh,
Eh, eh,
I
yeah.
recently had uh or was recently privy to a conversation like that, and I think it actually soothed my own anxiety about AI in relation to the legal field a lot more than I thought it would. So I will share the truth, but then I'll share the positive of it. So the truth is, as AI is further implemented, the need for associates is going to lessen because, the ability to sift through contracts, compare contracts, write contracts, which is essentially what a young associate does. You're just on contract paperwork for 2, 3 years. That's something an AI can do. And so,
Hmm.
for example, if a firm on a yearly basis intakes 20 new associates, if they've implemented a good AI system, that 20 can become 10, meaning that
Mm.
10 associates can do the work of originally what was 20 or maybe even five. But on a positive note, um, what this high level lawyer who actually is at the top of his firm, but I won't name names, um, what he told me or told the room was that AI still doesn't change the specifications for how an attorney can become a partner, because
Mm.
that's when the human aspect comes in. Because being a partner or being a junior partner or just a high level attorney comes down to your personability and your networking skills. And so, yes, you are going to have to work that little bit harder to earn your place as an associate in a firm, but it's about working smarter and working with people in order
Mm.
for you to get to that end point. Because with a lot of careers, I think people are scared that AI will take over, and to an extent it will do. But I think what people also forget is that we love people, like by human nature.
Yeah.
We love to communicate, we love to share ideas. Even if we don't speak, we love to share energy. And so there is so much to be said about your personality and who you are as a person. And so I think it also gives you the ability to hone that. So for me, I was really scared because I'm still an associate level. So I'm like, oh no, if someone gonna take over. But then when he said that, I was like, okay, I'm just gonna be extra charismatic so that I'm the most charismatic who's aware of AI, and then I'll make partner.
Yeah, I mean, this is a very minute point from what you said, but it's funny how people ignore soft skills even when the evidence shows that it's actually soft skills that drive
Yeah.
success. So let's for myself, for example, I took accounting.
Mhm.
Never became a CPA, but I carried obviously that finance acumen through my, let's say, my banking career. Um, but it's these transferable soft skills that made the difference. You know, your ability to craft a story, your ability to convince people, selling, simplifying. But then alongside the soft skills, there are also these, I would say, transferable technical skills. Like for
Mhm.
me, it was Microsoft Excel, which I studied back in college. Not part of the curriculum. I just studied it on my own. I had a bootlegged version in my laptop. because I didn't have access to the licensed edition. Sorry, Microsoft, but the F1 key was my best friend. So what's this function? What's that function? Okay, I learned it really well, and I think that must have powered at least half of my banking success, because a lot of the work I did was data related. That was also my gateway drug to analytics. And then I remember, I love retelling this story again and again. When I was a kid, I was hanging around my mother's office, and this was the first time word processing was making inroads into the market, because not everyone had a personal computer. But then when PC started rolling out, one of the first programs, I don't know if you even remember this, was called WordStar. It's the predecessor of MS Word. Uh,
Um,
so WordStar, there was a WordStar workshop in my mom's office. No one was attending. So this is like bring your kid to office day. So I attended the workshop. I learned WordStar. And back then people were into electric typewriters,
mhm.
where the main innovation was you can edit a line before you press enter and then goes up, because in the manual typewriter if you make a mistake you gotta have to correct that, like correction fluid or correction tape. But the electric typewriters by IBM allowed you to double check, is this line right? Press enter. But you can still make occasional mistakes. And then I remember no one was attending the workshop. I attended it. And the way the one conducting the workshop, I suppose it was a free one because government sponsors these trainings. It was a government office. Now the guy who the trainer said, "Hey, you study WordStar and you can review and edit the entire document first before you print it, and you can eliminate errors." And people were like, whoa, mind blown. And people started sitting and learning it. And for me, the insight was, of course, I loved it. I was computer literate at a very young age. I was coding at the age of 6. And I found this really amazing concept. Like, hey, you can edit stuff, which then was a precursor to web development much, much later in my life. But it's like WordStar was the gateway drug. Now, one thing I did notice, which I took to heart when I started learning Excel, the few people who learned WordStar when it was first coming out, they shredded that career, as in they got ahead, they got promoted. My mother was telling me, see, because she also studied WordStar early,
Mhm.
the people who learn WordStar are now doing well. So I'll add that to the list of, you need these soft skills, but you also need these transferable um, uh, workplace technical skills. Word processing is one, Excel is another, PowerPoint. And I see Gen AI in the same light, if because it's so
Amazing.
transferable, prompting AI. It's a co-pilot. If you saw that ad, I found it so amazing. I think those who get in early are going to get ahead. That's my
Yeah,
instinct.
like for example, just on productivity, it would normally like, couple dozen page contract. It'd take me like a whole day to just draft, let alone perfect.
Mhm.
Now I use a little bit of AI, it'll do the body work for me, but it's my inherent knowledge and my skill set that then perfects that contract. And so I can roll it out. If I'm asked for it in the morning, I'll double check, make sure all of the facts and legalities are okay. I'll have it done by lunchtime.
Yeah.
That is so
Yeah.
much more efficient. And then it removes, like going back to mental health, it removes my stress because I'm not freaking out at having to write a 24-page document in 6 hours. I'm only having to worry about making sure it's correct.
Mm.
It's so
Yeah.
much more efficient, stress-free, and it for both sides, for me and who I work with, it
Mhm.
just
Wow, I think we barely scratched the surface, but maybe
yeah.
we should save some for the next episode. But um, a few parting shots for the audience, maybe along the lines of mental health, AI, and basically your current advocacy. I mean, any pieces of advice, and maybe, of course, this is going to sound cliche as well, for aspiring beauty queens as well. And there may be some people in watching this who are looking into that, just breaking out of the tradition and the mold of what beauty queens are supposedly doing.
I mean, I think my parting words to aggregate all of the little points you've told me is it's to be adaptive.
Yeah.
For example, a beauty queen 6 years ago doesn't act or speak or look or advocate for anything that the beautiful women I've seen recently do. And it's because you adapt with change. You know, you become more aware, you become more powerful. Same with those in the education system, in the mental health industry, it's adaptivity. Because in order for you to feel empowered, to feel healthy, it's to also enable yourself to progress, because when you're stuck, that's when fear and anxiety sets in. And so it's having that courage and just that awareness of being open to learning and being open to growing, to holding yourself accountable, and then moving on from that. Because when you move, you accelerate towards a better awareness of yourself and your surroundings. So really, like whatever industry you're in, just keep progressing, keep adapting, and keep checking in on yourself every day. Like the world adapts at like an immense rate. So just keep checking in on yourself, asking yourself like, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Do you need a break? Do you feel overwhelmed? Are you missing out on things? And I always say talk to yourself like a friend. Like, you know how,
Yeah.
you catch up with your friend and you'll be like, how are you? How's life? How's everything? We never ask that of ourselves. We wait for other people to ask us. But wouldn't life be easier if we just did a check-in every day asking
Or
ourselves?
maybe AI can check in, you know?
Maybe I could check in, just
Yeah.
chat with ChatGPT, have a little conversation and see what comes out of your mind, and then use those as starting points for the day.
Yeah, it's amazing. Anyway, it's nowhere near enough, but as I said, we have to save some for the next episode. But I want to thank you, Nikki, for sharing your perspectives. Again, and it's probably off the beaten path for many people to hear it from a rather unique set of experiences. Someone who's gone through a beauty pageant, a lawyer, into mental health, worked in BPO, worked with BPOs, and has charity work. But again, I want to thank you for sharing those stories.
Mm. And thank you so much for having me. This is one of the first interviews I've done that hasn't been centered around beauty pageants. And as much as I appreciate the opportunity to speak with a lot of people, I do sometimes miss the opportunity to speak with substance, where I'm like,
Yeah, yeah,
need more. Who cares what I'm wearing? Please ask me, something about what I'm feeling or what I'm doing. So thank you for the opportunity to have done that.
yeah. And hope to see you again very soon.
Yes, definitely. Thank you.